ground, drive back the insurgents. No, this is the Iraqis' job. These people are advisors. Now, what's interesting about what the Ayatollah said, and also what has been said on the Iraqi side of Shia, which is Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani. Remember, Ali Sistani, several weeks ago, issued a call to arms for the Shia to stand up and fight alongside with government of Iraq troops. I think what you're looking at is an interesting back channel construction, because just in the last 48 to 72 hours, the Mahdi army, which was directed by Muqtada al-Sadr, which stood down, Muqtada stood them down in 2008 and said, you guys disband. But what's happened is, as you've seen in your own footage that has come in from Baghdad, the Mahdi army is back. The Mahdi army will fight side by side with the government of Iraq troops. So in essence, while you have the Iranian side saying no direct intervention by the United States, there's not going to be a direct intervention. He's saying that basically as posturing. What's really going on back channel is, as I say, we are realizing that there are Shia proxy irregular forces, such as Muqtada's Sadr army, okay? Mahdi army. These are the people that will be doing the fighting alongside with the government forces from GOI, the government of Iraq. It's an interesting construction, but that's the way of the world there. And I lived there for a long time, so I get it.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you this last question. In spite of all of these interventions, ISIS appear to be gaining the upper hand in this war so far. And the U.S. says it's not ready to send combat troops to Iraq, just like you've mentioned again. What then is the way forward? How can this crisis be resolved, in your opinion?
I do not believe in the slightest that either Washington or, for that matter, Tehran are going to let the government of Iraq get destroyed and collapsed under the pressure of attack by ISIS. ISIS is a relatively small force. We're only talking about tens of thousands of people, as opposed to hundreds of thousands of people in the Iraqi army itself. I think that there's going to be proxies involved in this. It's going to be difficult to try to hold ISIS back, but also notice something. ISIS has been picking off the low-hanging fruit on the trees. They've been going out and taking over places that were fairly vulnerable. Notice that they have started to encircle Baghdad, but you notice that so far they have launched no attacks or attempted no incursions into Baghdad, because that's where the Mahdi army and that's where GOI forces are hunkered down and ready to fight. What they may try to do as a strategy is encircle Baghdad and try to strangle it that way. But as far as openly assaulting the city, at least from what I see right now, I don't put a high likelihood on that, because the concentration of forces to attack and kill ISIS or ISIL in response is very concentrated and very strong. ISIL does not have major equipment the way that the government forces do. This is all asymmetric. They conquered and took some stuff in Mosul and in some of the other cities, but it's not as if they have the Iraqi Air Force at their disposal. ISIL will not be launching airstrikes on Baghdad. It is still asymmetric. There is a disproportionate difference between what the insurgents have and what the government forces have. But again, we don't know yet. But this is where my logic follows at this point.
Well, we can only hope that the government uses all of its advantage to make sure that Iraq is brought back to peace. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for speaking to us on The World Today. Always a pleasure to have you. Let's move on now. We have to quickly get to Africa before we move on. An Egyptian court has sentenced 3 Al Jazeera journalists accused of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood to 7 years in jail. The Cairo court convicted Peter Greste, Mohammed Fahmy, and Baham Mohammed of spreading false news and supporting the now banned Islamist group Muslim Brotherhood. Well, the trio had however, denied all of the charges. 9 defendants tried in absentia, including 3 foreign journalists, also received 10-year sentences. The trial has caused an international outcry amid claims that it was politicized.
Heavy security at a Cairo court in Egypt. The court is set to deliver the verdicts in the trial of 3 Al Jazeera journalists. Families and journalists also wait outside the court. Later, the judge sentenced the 3 to 7 years in jail after finding them guilty on charges including helping a terrorist organization by publishing lies. The 3 journalists include Australian Peter Crest, Al Jazeera's Kenya-based correspondent, and Canadian-Egyptian national Mohammed Fahmy, who is the bureau chief of Al Jazeera English. A disappointed Julie Bishop, Australia's foreign minister, reacts to the sentencing.
We understand that Egypt has been through some very difficult times and there has been a great deal of turmoil in Egypt. But this kind of verdict does nothing to support Egypt's claim to be on a transition to democracy. And the Australian government urges the new government of Egypt to reflect on what message is being sent to the world about the situation in Egypt. Freedom and freedom of the press is fundamental to a democracy, and we are deeply concerned that this verdict is part of a broader attempt to muzzle the media freedom that upholds democracies around the world.
A 3rd defendant, Egyptian producer Bahir Mohammed, received an additional 3-year jail sentence on a separate charge involving possession of weapons. Another 11 defendants were sentenced in absentia to 10 years.
There's more to come on the world today when we come back from the break. The Sudanese woman sentenced to death for marrying a Christian in Sudan has now been freed. We have details when we come back from the break, so join us again.
The world is an ever-changing global village. Hunger, conflict, and the quest to maintain established territories form the next frontier of discussions that determine the world we choose to live in. Every word, every discussion, every agreement or disagreement is crucial. Be part of the next frontier. Be part of Diplomatic Channel, only on Channels Television.
Welcome back to the world today. As the Syrian crisis continues to spread across the border, Israel says it has carried out airstrikes on military targets in Damascus. The military said it had attacked 9 targets in response to the killing of a 15-year-old boy in a strike in the occupied Golan Heights on the border between the 2 countries on Sunday. 2 others, including the boy's father, an Israeli defense contractor, were injured when a blast hit their vehicle. Israel called the boy's death the most substantial incident in the Golan since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011. It is unclear whether Syrian rebels or government forces were behind the attack. Meanwhile, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons says the last of Syria's declared chemical weapons have been shipped out of the country for destruction. The operation to destroy Syria's chemical weapons arsenal is several months behind schedule. A senior Afghan election official who is embroiled in a fraud scandal in the presidential runoff vote has resigned. Zia-ul-Haq Ahmad, who denied allegations of ballot box stuffing earlier this month, well, he said he was stepping down for the sake of national unity. His resignation comes after audio tapes were released allegedly revealing that Mr. Hamakel was trying to influence the outcome of the vote. They were published by the camp of one of the candidates, Abdullah. However, his rival Ashraf Ghani has also made allegations of fraud. Now we are in Africa. We start here in Nigeria. Reports say that scores of people may have died after an explosion went off at the premises